In the glittering glass towers of Chicago, people once believed Ethan Caldwell was the golden man of real estate. But behind billion-dollar contracts and the smile on magazine covers, a woman was hidden in the shadows. Naomi Baptiste, the brain of the entire empire. When betrayed and cast aside, she did not weep, but opened the secret door she had long prepared. From the silent shadows, Naomi rose, gathering women who had once been trampled, exposing the city's most powerful man. This is not just the story of a divorce, but an anthem of justice, love rediscovered in the storm, and a new empire built from ashes. Morning light from the tall glass towers of the Loop, Chicago, poured down onto Naomi Baptiste's desk, stretching across the dark brown, gleaming wood. She sat there, back straight, her deep brown eyes gliding over each line of figures in the Thornfield acquisition contract, her carefully manicured fingers lightly tracing the revenue columns. A contract worth nearly $40 million, and one small mistake could ruin the deal. For Naomi, these were not just dry numbers. They were the livelihoods of hundreds of construction workers, the fate of neighborhoods, the future of a piece of land that would either be reborn or abandoned. The company name on the documents was not hers. The brass plate on the office door bore no Naomi Baptiste. It read only, Caldwell Consulting, her husband's name, Ethan Caldwell. The entire building knew Ethan, who appeared constantly on finance magazine covers, flashing a confident smile beneath bold headlines. Chicago's golden man of real estate. But hardly anyone knew Naomi, the woman silently standing behind all those so-called miracle projects. Mrs. Caldwell. Her assistant's voice rang through the intercom, using a surname Naomi felt increasingly distant from. Mr. Caldwell's office called. The Henderson project needs urgent attention. Naomi clenched her jaw slightly. A slight movement, but enough to reveal the weight of exhaustion. Another crisis. Another mistake Ethan had made that she would have to fix. On her computer screen, a copy of Business Chicago Weekly leaned against the corner, Ethan's face tilted high, wineglass in hand, his dazzling smile under the caption, Touching Gold, Ethan Caldwell turns dreams into an empire. Naomi stared at the photo, then turned back to the Henderson files. 3 months ago, she had warned Ethan about the zoning trouble with this land. He had only laughed, patted her hand, and dismissed it as the unnecessary worry of a wife who liked to play at business. And now, with the city refusing permits and investors shouting, Ethan again needed her miracle. Naomi had lived this cycle for 8 years. Every problem, every emergency meeting, every legal loophole, she patched them all so that Ethan could appear before the public as a victor. People praised him as a genius, but the true genius sat in an unmarked room, with sleepless eyes and a mind no one bothered to recognize. She remembered her grandmother's whispered words on her wedding day, My daughter, a woman must always keep her own door, an escape that needs no one's permission. Naomi had obeyed. Beyond their joint assets, she had secretly built her portfolio. Shares in concrete and steel suppliers, the backbone company's No Cross Holdings project could survive without. Ethan knew she had some investments, but never asked much. In his mind, a wife was for charity galas and evening gowns. Business was a man's arena. He had no idea his condescension would become a fatal weakness. That noon, Naomi finished rescuing Henderson, rearranging the timeline, convincing several city council members, and calming most of the investors' rage. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. Heard you handled Henderson great. Thanks, babe. Dinner tonight with Farrow Group. Wear the blue dress. No praise, no recognition of her talent. Just another command, reducing her to an accessory to his suit. Naomi let the screen go dark, her reflection staring back at her. High cheekbones from her Haitian grandmother, dark coffee skin, deep eyes. A beauty both elegant and intelligent, but to her husband, only background decoration. That evening, under the crystal chandeliers of Everest, Chicago, Naomi slipped into her blue dress, walking beside Ethan into the high society dinner. Laughter, wine glasses, talk of profits, yachts, vacation estates. She was a shadow among the noise. When Ethan spoke passionately about his vision for the Brooklyn waterfront project, describing it as the invention of his career, Naomi only curved her lips faintly. Every idea, from community gardens, affordable housing, and local business incentives, had been her work for months. Yet in everyone's eyes, Ethan was still the man with vision. "Mr. Caldwell, you're remarkable," Linda Farrow gushed. "I don't know how you come up with such humane ideas." "Just a matter of listening," Ethan smiled, knowing what the community needs. Naomi sat silent, her smile carved from ice. But suddenly, a warm baritone sounded behind her. "Naomi Baptiste." She lifted her head. A familiar face approached, hair salt and pepper, sharp grey eyes. Julian Mercer. Her old classmate at Northwestern Law, the man who once debated through the night with her about justice and social responsibility, the one who believed Naomi could change the world. "Julian," she breathed, as if time itself had stopped. Ethan glanced sharply, voice edged with irritation. "You two know each other?" "Law school classmates," Julian answered, his gaze never leaving Naomi. "She was the smartest in our class." The table froze. It had been a long time since anyone called her smart instead of beautiful. Under the table, Ethan squeezed her hand. Hard enough to warn. Julian continued, "I still remember your arguments about corporate responsibility to communities." Very sharp. Naomi lowered her eyes, cheeks warm. He remembered. After all these years, he still remembered. Ethan cut in, his tone mocking. "Naomi's not interested in dusty law theories anymore. She's busy with charity galas and fashion now." Julian's smile dimmed slightly, but his eyes toward Naomi held understanding. His fingertips brushed hers as he offered his business card, a small contact that sent a tremor through her chest. That night, Ethan was silent on the drive back to their penthouse. Once inside, he spoke with disdain. "Old boyfriend?" "Classmate," Naomi replied calmly. "He looked at you like he wanted more than classmate." Ethan sneered, then walked away. Naomi quietly tucked Julian's card into her purse. A door had just opened, revealing something she had forgotten, the feeling of being seen and recognized. In the dark of their room, beside her husband's steady snore, Naomi lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she remembered her youthful dream, to use her mind to change the world, not to live as a shadow behind a man. And now, someone who still believed that had returned to her life. Naomi sat in her 34th floor office overlooking Chicago streets 3 days after the dinner. Below, cars rushed through the loop, horns blaring with the rhythm of busy life. But inside, the silence felt suffocating. On her desk, piles of files for the Riverside project, each page marked with Naomi's red pen. Detail the high-paid consultants had all overlooked. David Kim, the chief architect, sat opposite, still looking bewildered. "Mrs. Caldwell, I don't understand how you spotted the wetlands issue from the preliminary report." Naomi smiled lightly, voice modest. "Experience. I lived many years in Louisiana with my grandmother. I can tell which land holds water, which has underground veins. I can read it in the color of the grass, the smell of the mud." David nodded, almost admiring. "Brilliant, truly brilliant. Without you, this project would have collapsed at the root." When the room emptied, Naomi sighed. Even such words, heard only within closed walls, warmed her frozen heart. However, once she stepped outside, Ethan would again be the urban genius, while she remained the supportive wife. That afternoon, Naomi left the office early. She walked to Grant Park, where autumn leaves painted the path gold. Children played, and street music floated in the air. She sat on a stone bench, inhaling deeply, seeking a taste of freedom. "Naomi." She turned. Julian Mercer stood there, grey trench coat, leather briefcase in hand. Still composed, his eyes as bright as ever. "I usually walk here after court," Julian explained. "Didn't expect to find you." Naomi laughed, a hint of shyness. "Maybe Chicago's smaller than we think." They walked together along the stone path. In the vast space, their silence felt natural, needing no effort to fill. "You did well, Naomi," Julian said firmly. "The Brooklyn waterfront project, that was clearly your mark." "I knew it instantly." Naomi faltered, heart pounding. "Why do you think that?" Because I remember how you spoke of fair planning, of developing without erasing old communities. That idea could only come from you. Ethan could never think like that. Naomi stayed quiet. His words were sunlight piercing the dark where she'd been buried. It had been so long since anyone reminded her that her mind mattered. Julian stopped, turned to meet her eyes. Naomi, do you know? You matter. Your ideas, your intelligence, they matter. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. For a moment, Naomi wanted to believe him. But reason whispered. She was still the wife of Ethan Caldwell, a man powerful enough to crush anyone who opposed him. You don't understand, she murmured. Everything. It's complicated. Julian shook his head, gaze steady. Love isn't complicated. Justice isn't. People make it complicated to control us. But you deserve the simplest truth. To be respected and seen. Emotions surged within her. She wanted to step closer, let Julian's hand hold hers, and hear him say again that she was not a shadow. But then her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Henderson meeting moved to 4. Need you to clean up the mess. Naomi silenced the phone and slipped it into her coat. I have to go. Ethan needs me. Julian nodded, pulling another card from his wallet. On the back, handwritten digits, his personal number. He placed it in her hand, fingers brushing her skin again, sending a current she couldn't describe. If you need to talk, business, law, anything, call me. Naomi tucked the card into her pocket, close to her heart. She walked away, not daring to look back. But she knew Julian's eyes followed until she vanished behind the trees. The Henderson meeting went exactly as she expected. Ethan sat there, flattering investors, blaming bureaucratic city officials, while Naomi laid out step-by-step solutions that saved the project from collapse. Investors left reassured. Ethan held his head high, basking in their praise. Couldn't do it without my secret weapon, he said, patting Naomi's shoulder as if she were a lucky charm. The crowd laughed, and Naomi forced a stiff smile. That night, they dined with friends at an Italian restaurant. Ethan boasted about his upcoming golf trip, while Naomi sat quietly, eyes fixed on her wine glass. Another businessman's wife, Melissa Stanford, leaned in to whisper, "You seem distracted. Everything okay?" Naomi smiled faintly, just tired. But in truth, she felt the solid weight of Julian's card in her coat pocket. It was like a glowing ember, searing her chest, reminding her there was another door, another world, where she was not invisible. When they returned home, Ethan didn't notice how long she had lingered away from the table, didn't see the blush on her cheeks or the spark in her eyes from a new message. A message from Julian. Naomi, you can never be invisible. You shine too strongly to be hidden. Reading it, tears welled in Naomi's eyes, not from sorrow, but because, for the first time in 8 years, someone reminded her that she truly existed. In the cold penthouse room, Ethan slept soundly beside her, while Naomi lay awake in the dark, her heart racing with a flicker of hope. And somewhere out there, a man still believed she had the strength to step out of the shadows. Monday morning, the sky over Chicago was heavy gray, drizzling on the office windows. Naomi Baptiste had just signed the Riverside project report when a knock sounded. Not the familiar tap of her assistant, but firm, insistent. The kind of knock from someone who came not to ask, but to impose. Mrs. Caldwell. A silver-haired man in a grey suit strode in with unshakable confidence. He didn't wait for her invitation, but walked straight to her desk, dropping a thick envelope. Richard Halpern. I'm the attorney representing Mr. Ethan Caldwell. Naomi froze. Attorney? Yes. He smirked, a blade disguised as a smile. I have some documents you need to review immediately. Naomi's hand touched the envelope. Cold. Cold as ice. She pulled out the thick stack, sharp printed lines staring back at her. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers. For several seconds, all sound vanished. Only the pounding of her heart remained. Halpern studied her without a trace of sympathy. The terms are unambiguous, Mrs. Baptiste. According to the prenuptial agreement signed 8 years ago, you are entitled to no significant portion of the marital assets. Mr. Caldwell will provide temporary support, so you sign quickly and quietly. Naomi flipped to the last page, where a handwritten note was clipped. The handwriting was jagged, unmistakable. Thank you for being the perfect accessory all these years. But now I need an upgrade. Don't make this difficult. Her hand trembled, but her face stayed stone cold. She lifted her gaze, voice steady. I'll need time to review. Of course. Halpern adjusted his tie, and his victorious smile was intact. But I'd advise you. Resistance will only make things unpleasant. He left, the air collapsing behind him. Naomi sat motionless. In her mind, 8 years spun wildly. Nights working until 3 a.m., drafting strategies, calculating costs, while Ethan slept soundly or laughed at bars. All her effort, now reduced to a few words. Accessory. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Sorry you had to find out this way. My lawyer insisted on formality. Let's keep things civil. Civil? What was civil about tearing apart 8 years of marriage with a cold envelope in front of her staff? Naomi shot up, unable to breathe in the office. She grabbed her bag, left the divorce papers behind, and hurried into the elevator. As the doors closed, she pressed her forehead to the glass, storms raging inside her. Grant Park was quieter that afternoon. The rain had eased, but the air was still damp and chill. Naomi sat on her usual stone bench, eyes drifting toward distant Lake Michigan. Her phone rang. She answered without checking the number. Naomi? A warm, steady voice. Julian Mercer. At that one word, her defenses cracked. Naomi broke down, sobs choking her throat. Naomi, what happened? Julian's urgency sharpened. She struggled for breath. He filed for divorce. Right in my office. Through his lawyer. Silence, then Julian's voice, low and restrained fury. That bastard. Naomi shivered. 8 years. 8 years I gave everything, and now I have nothing. The prenup will leave me with nothing. No. Julian's reply was firm. You are not nothing. You built that empire. You have proof. You have your mind. You have power. And you have me. Naomi lifted her head, tear-blurred eyes finding him. Julian was really there, running up from the far end of the park, still in his suit, tie hastily loosened. He sat beside her, breath heavy. I'm here, he said, steady as stone. I won't let you face this alone. Naomi bit her lip, shame and relief mixing. Julian, I don't even know where to begin. Begin with the truth, he answered, that you are not an accessory. You are the brain, the heart, the strength behind every project he took credit for. And now, he will pay for underestimating you. Naomi looked into his eyes, seeing not just a legal promise, but an unwavering belief. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Rain streaked down the penthouse windows that night, Chicago's lights casting faint shadows into the bedroom. Ethan Caldwell lay with his back turned, breathing evenly, while Naomi stared at the ceiling, wide awake. Beside her sat the divorce envelope. Ethan had left it on the table as casually as a business contract. Marriage had never been a vow to him, only a convenient deal. Naomi rose quietly, draped in a thin coat, stepping into the living room. The warm lamplight glowed against polished wood, reflecting the lone figure of a betrayed woman. She opened the envelope again and reread every page. The prenup, signed at 24, blinded by love and trust. Ethan had said, I just need a little insurance. You'll never have to worry. Naive and confident in his passion, she signed without her own lawyer. Now each clause was a chain, locking away 8 years of labor, leaving her with nothing. But this time, Naomi did not cry. The tears had fallen in the park. Now, only fire remained. She remembered Julian's words, begin with the truth. And the truth was, Ethan could not exist without her. Every project, every connection, every negotiation, her hands had built them all. He could erase her from magazines, but not from the bricks and contracts that bore her mark. Naomi closed the stack and placed it back on the table. For the first time in years, she no longer feared Ethan. The next morning, Ethan was busy making calls with investors. Naomi quietly prepared coffee, listening as his voice carried from the living room. Don't worry, Everything's under control. Naomi will clean up the mess. She always does. She set the cup in front of him. Ethan looked up, smirked. Thanks, darling. We've got dinner with the Farrow group tonight. Wear the red dress. They like you to stand out. As if yesterday's divorce papers never existed. It is as if 8 years of marriage could be erased with a shrug. Business is business. Love is love. Naomi stayed silent. To him, she was still a prop, a glittering ornament who performed miracles. He didn't see it. This prop had awakened and had a plan of her own. That afternoon, Naomi met Julian at Mercer & Associates, his law office in an old granite building downtown. The room smelled faintly of fresh paper and oak, shelves lined with thick volumes, sunlight catching his sharp features. Julian pulled out a chair. Naomi, we need a strategy. Do you have proof of your role in Cross Holdings? Naomi opened her bag, pulling out a hard drive. I kept everything, every email, every draft, from the very beginning. He thought I just sent and deleted, but I saved it all. I even have files proving Brooklyn Waterfront was my idea, not his. Julian plugged it into his computer, scanning folders. His eyes lit. Perfect. This is exactly what we need. Not just to challenge the prenup, but to prove you were the real mind. Naomi clenched her hands, voice low but resolute. Julian, I don't just want out. I want him to pay. He belittled me, stole my credit, and now discards me like outdated furniture. I want him to lose everything. Julian lifted his head, meeting her eyes. Then we'll make it happen. But Naomi, I have to ask, are you sure you're ready? Because once we start, there's no going back. Naomi inhaled deeply, recalling 8 years in the shadows, her light stolen. She nodded. I've been trapped long enough. It's time to step out. Julian smiled, pride and admiration mingling in his gaze. Good, then we begin here. Ethan Caldwell thinks he's cornered you, but he doesn't realize. He's just awakened the most dangerous opponent of his life. That night, Naomi sat in the small study of the penthouse, a warm desk lamp glowing over scattered papers. Beside her lay Julian's card, resting neatly next to her files. She touched its surface, as if it were a promise. She was no longer alone. From the bedroom came Ethan's voice, smooth and practiced over the phone. Yes, darling, I'll have this wrapped up soon. Then we'll have time for each other. Darling, for someone else, the upgrade. Naomi closed her eyes, then opened them, her pupils burning bright. The battle had only begun, and for the first time in 8 years, Naomi felt ready. Thursday morning, Chicago gleamed under a rare burst of sunlight after days of grey rain. But on the 34th floor, the air was taut as a drawn bowstring. Ethan Caldwell slammed the desk after ending a call, face flushed red. Another delay. Why hasn't Meridian Concrete delivered? Who's responsible for this? The management team ducked their heads, fumbling for words. At the far end of the table, Naomi sat still, her gaze calm. She already knew the answer because she had called Thomas Meridian 2 hours earlier. 3 days after receiving the divorce petition, Naomi had opened the door her grandmother once told her never to forget. Over the years, she had quietly bought shares, restructured debt, and saved suppliers from collapse. In return, she gained control. Ethan had never asked questions, dismissing her investments as a wife's pastime. But now, that very condescension left him powerless. She remembered Thomas's voice over the phone. Mrs. Baptiste, you saved my company back then. We'll comply if you want us to pause deliveries to Cross Holdings. We owe you. She had smiled, answering simply, yes. Just a temporary pause. Official reason, legal review. One similar call to Maria Santos of Atlas Steel, and within hours, the 2 backbone suppliers of Cross Holdings had frozen their operations. Now, Ethan sat in the boardroom, raging like a caged animal, while Naomi's expression stayed composed. Naomi, he barked, you know something, don't you? They wouldn't dare do this without someone pulling strings. Naomi slowly lifted her head, her dark eyes glinting. Maybe they just want to protect their interests. You've been too confident that loyalty lasts forever. Ethan slammed the table again, but she didn't flinch. Naomi saw it clearly for the first time, the actual shift of power. He was only noise, while she was the one moving the pieces. That afternoon, Naomi drove north to Lincoln Park, where a quiet 3-story townhouse stood among tree-lined streets. She had bought it through a shell company 3 years ago, a private fortress against the worst day she could imagine. She unlocked the door. The faint scent of new wood and paint lingered. Minimalist interiors, pale oak floors, expansive windows opening to golden maples outside. This was more than an investment. This was freedom. Naomi stepped inside, slipped off her shoes, and sank into the sofa. For the first time in days, she could breathe. The doorbell rang. Cautiously, she went to open it. Julian Mercer stood there, a paper bag of hot food in hand, his expression a mix of worry and relief. "I figured you hadn't eaten," Julian said warmly. "I brought chicken soup and bread." Naomi chuckled softly, caught off guard by the simple kindness. She let him in, and the room seemed to brighten with his presence. Over dinner, Julian glanced around. "This place is yours?" Naomi nodded. "A fallback. In case everything collapsed, Ethan doesn't know." His eyes shone with admiration. "You've been preparing all along." Her voice was quiet, but steady. "The first time he stole my work, I realized I needed a place no one could take from me." Julian paused, then said slowly, "Naomi, you're not just a betrayed wife. You're a woman playing chess while he was only rolling dice." The words drew a genuine smile from her. For once, she was being described as she was. A strategist, not a secret weapon, not an accessory. Naomi didn't return to the penthouse that night. She sat on the second-floor balcony, city lights twinkling in the distance. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, Ethan's calls and messages piling up, shifting from anger to pleading. "Naomi, this is serious. We need to talk. We must stand united. You can't sabotage business like this. Come home. We can negotiate." Naomi read the words, then turned off the phone. For the first time, she felt no fear of Ethan. The man who once wielded all the power was now begging. She whispered into the night, almost to herself. "The game's begun, Ethan. And this time, you don't hold the pieces." By morning, Cross Holdings was chaos like a hive struck open. Project heads ran through the halls, phones buzzed, shouts echoed from every office. Ethan strode in, suit sharp but face strained, sweat beading at his temples despite the cool air. "Where's Naomi?" he snarled at his assistant. "Get her in the boardroom now. I need to know what the hell is going on." Naomi entered with composed steps, a neat file in her hand, her eyes cold as steel. Midtown, Riverside, Henderson all halted. Ethan roared, "Concrete and steel won't deliver." "Did you speak to them?" She set the file on the table, her tone even. "Thomas Meridian said he needs legal assurance before proceeding. Maria Santos feels the same. They don't want to be dragged into asset disputes if our divorce hits the press." Ethan's face drained of color. What did you tell them?" "Just the truth," Naomi replied, gaze unwavering. "That our marriage is under legal review, and that I hold rightful stakes in their companies." The room froze. Ethan gaped, never once having imagined this. In his mind, Naomi was a woman for galas and charity checks, not a shareholder controlling the lifelines of his empire. "How much do you own?" His voice cracked. "Enough for them to listen," Naomi said flatly. Ethan braced against the table, breath ragged. "My God, Naomi, are you trying to destroy everything?" "No," she answered slowly. "I just want you to understand you're no longer in total control." In that moment, the balance of power shifted for good. For the first time, Ethan Caldwell saw Naomi's actual existence. That afternoon, Naomi returned to the townhouse. Late sunlight streamed through the glass in the kitchen, stretching across the oak floor. Julian was already there, sleeves rolled up, sorting documents across the dining table. "I brought filings from the court," he said firmly. "We can challenge the prenup on grounds of financial concealment." Naomi placed another stack before him. "These are my shareholder records in Meridian Concrete and Atlas Steel. I've kept them hidden for years. Now it's time to bring them out." Julian skimmed through, eyes widening. "Naomi, this isn't just some stake. This is control. You hold the keys to Ethan's entire empire." Naomi sipped her tea, voice calm but sharp. He thought I was just good at picking dresses. All the while I was playing a long game. Julian looked at her, admiration and awe softening his smile. I've never seen anyone turn another's contempt into such a weapon. Naomi smiled faintly. She knew Julian wasn't speaking as a lawyer, but as a man who truly saw her. That night, Naomi stood again on the balcony. Below, street lamps bathed the red maples in gold. Her phone buzzed for the 10th time that day. Ethan. Naomi, we need to talk. You can't do this to me. You're ruining everything. I love you. We can work this out. Think about your reputation. Don't let people see you as vindictive. She read them all, but gave no reply. She knew this rhythm: denial, rage, then bargaining. She whispered, I know you too well, Ethan. And that's why you have nothing left to threaten me with. Julian stepped out beside her. He won't stop. But now you have weapons, and you have allies. Naomi turned to him. She saw her reflection in his bright grey eyes, not the invisible wife, but the strategist preparing for the greatest battle of her life. Then, Naomi said, her voice steady, it's time he learned what happens when you underestimate a woman. Chicago's weekend sky was murky grey, the wind off Lake Michigan sweeping fiercely, carrying fallen golden leaves across the sidewalks. Inside the Lincoln Park townhouse, Naomi Baptiste was setting a long dining table, not for one of Ethan Caldwell's ostentatious parties, but for a private gathering where women who had been hurt by him or by the power circles he thrived in would sit together for the first time. Candlelight flickered, red wine glowed in crystal glasses, and porcelain dishes were elegant and straightforward. Naomi wanted the space to feel warm, so none of them would feel alone. Julian Mercer reviewed a thick folder in the corner, his expression sharp with focus. He knew this evening could become a turning point. The doorbell rang. The first to arrive was Monica Reyes, a tall, slender Latina businesswoman with cold fire in her eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. She had poured tens of millions into Ethan's projects, only to discover her money funneled through shady shell companies. Naomi. Monica clasped her hand tightly. I've been waiting for this moment. They call him a genius, but I know the truth. He's a thief and a fraud. Next came Sofia Delgado, the widow of a partner Ethan had ruthlessly pushed aside. She carried a small bag containing an audio recording of her late husband's confession, a confession of secret dealings. Then Allison Grant, an architect whose designs Ethan had stolen, nearly destroyed her career. Maria Santos, CEO of Atlas Steel, is now firmly on Naomi's side. And finally, Linda Farrow, wife of wavering investor Charles Farrow, here, not out of sentiment, but out of a personal hunger for justice. Charles himself had nearly been ruined by Ethan's tricks. The room is filled. 6 women, 6 bitter stories, but their eyes converged on Naomi, as if she were the axis around which they had finally found their center. Naomi rose, her voice steady. I know we are here for one reason: Ethan Caldwell. He underestimated us, exploited our silence, and believes he can go on without consequence. I invited you not just to share pain, but to turn it into a weapon. The air crackled. Monica dropped a stack of papers on the table. Suspicious wire transfers from Cross Holdings to Panama. I've kept them for years. Sophia produced the recorder. This is my husband's voice from a private meeting with Ethan. He told me, if anything happened, to give it to someone I trust. Today, I trust you. Allison opened her laptop, displaying side-by-side drawings, the original design, and Ethan's plagiarized version. He didn't just steal my work. He compromised safety standards. Naomi's heart surged with strength. These women, once dismissed, silenced, trampled, now sat around her table, ready to rise. Julian finally spoke, his voice cutting like steel. Together, these aren't fragments anymore. They form a complete picture of a man who abused power and broke the law. I can build this into both civil and criminal cases, but it will take patience and unity. Monica's chin lifted. We've waited long enough. Naomi, lead us. Naomi laid her hand on the table's wood. From this moment, we are no longer victims. We are allies, and we will drag Ethan Caldwell into the light he thought would never touch him. Applause rose softly, but with the weight of conviction. After the others had gone late that night, Naomi and Julian remained. Her wineglass was empty. He was stacking documents into neat piles. Silence filled the room, not heavy, but companionable. "You did something I didn't expect," Julian said quietly. "You turned a scattered group of women into a front line." Naomi gave a tired smile, eyes still burning. "I didn't. Ethan did, when he crushed each of them. I only brought them together." Julian Skäselingal. "Naomi, do you realize you've become what Ethan fears most? A woman not only intelligent, but also trusted." She looked away, unsettled by the warmth in her chest. Strength, yes, but also something softer, something she hadn't felt in years, being seen without being diminished. In the townhouse's glow, Naomi whispered to herself, this battle was no longer just a divorce. It was justice for every woman Ethan had trampled. And now, she wasn't walking alone. The next morning, Naomi woke to quiet sunlight filtering through the curtains. On the living room table lay towers of files, evidence her allies had entrusted to her. She poured coffee, gazing at the stacks like walls of fortification. She felt lighter. She was no longer Mrs. Caldwell. A knock at the door. Julian appeared in a blue shirt, a laptop, and another stack of files in his hand. He smiled at Naomi, turning her dining table into a war room. "I guessed right," he said. "You didn't sleep much." "How could I?" Naomi handed him coffee. "I just listened again to Sophia's recording, hearing her husband's voice. It was like a message from the grave. He knew Ethan would betray him, and he prepared for it." Julian nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard. "We'll catalog everything. Each piece is marked as financial, legal, or witness testimony. I'll build a master case file." Naomi sat beside him, eyes fixed on the glowing screen as lines of numbers, transcripts, and documents fell into place. At the center of the mosaic, Ethan Caldwell's name blazed like a beast being exposed. "How long before Ethan strikes back?" she asked. "Not long," Julian replied. "He'll soon realize the suppliers are locked down and hunt for cracks. But we have the advantage. He never prepared for a real legal war, because he never believed you could fight." Naomi's lips curled coldly. The biggest mistake of his life. That afternoon, Naomi met privately with Maria Santos at a cafe in River North. Maria, who had carried her family's company after her father's death, looked at Naomi with rare respect. "Naomi, I owe you. If you hadn't invested, Atlas Steel would have gone under. Hundreds of my workers would have been out of jobs. Now you need me, I'm with you." Naomi leaned forward, eyes unwavering. "Maria, this isn't just about me. Ethan built his power by exploiting women and vulnerable communities. If we let him go on, more people will suffer." Maria nodded firmly. "You have me, and I'll bring in others." As Naomi stepped into the brisk evening wind, she felt it. She was no longer hiding. She was walking openly, in daylight. That night, Naomi and Julian worked again. The documents had been condensed into a single, organized case file, thick as a novel. Naomi studied him, realizing the distance between them was shrinking not only across the table, but in the rhythm of their breaths, the look in his eyes. "Julian," she asked softly, "are you ever afraid? Going up against someone like Ethan, wealthy, connected, ruthless." He looked up, gray eyes hard with resolve. "Yes, I'm afraid. But not for me. For you, because you've carried enough pain already. But that's why I can't back down. Justice doesn't happen by itself. Someone has to fight for it." Naomi fell silent, heart racing not only from his words, but from how he looked at her, as if she were the axis of this battle, not a shadow at the edge. She whispered, "For the first time in my life, I don't feel invisible anymore." Julian reached out, his hand brushing hers. "You were never invisible, Naomi. The world was blind." In that moment, Naomi knew. This fight wasn't just about reclaiming assets or reputation. It was about reclaiming voices, reclaiming place. She looked out the window. Chicago shimmered in the night. And in that darkness, Naomi Baptiste swore, Ethan Caldwell would never again sleep peacefully on his throne of lies. In early October, Chicago turned suddenly cold. The wind off Lake Michigan cut sharply, sweeping through the Loop's glittering streets. From her Lincoln Park townhouse, Naomi Baptiste gazed through the window at the bare branches of maple trees, their leaves almost gone. Beside her sat Julian Mercer's neatly stacked case files, each page a sharpened arrow aimed at the heart of the Caldwell empire. She pressed play on one recording. Ethan's voice filled the room, smooth, arrogant, gloating about his tricks to hide money. His laughter made Naomi's skin crawl. The man who once whispered "I love you" into her ear was nothing but greed and deceit. Her phone rang suddenly. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. Naomi hesitated, then answered. "Naomi." His voice was unusually soft, almost tender. "Can we talk? Not about lawyers, not about projects. Just two people who once loved each other." Naomi stayed silent. Ethan pressed on. "I know you're angry, but you can't do this. You're destroying the company you helped build. Do you think investors will side with you? You're just, just the bitter ex-wife." Naomi's grip tightened. Every word was a knife. He still thought of her as just a shadow, an accessory. "You'll regret this," she said coldly, and hung up. That evening, Julian arrived with 2 paper boxes of takeout from a State Street Chinese place. Naomi wasn't hungry initially, but the simple scent and his low, steady voice eased her. They sat on the living room floor, eating and talking about strategy. "He'll strike back," Julian said, tapping his chopsticks against the carton. "Smear campaigns, legal threats, you need to be ready." "I know." Naomi's voice was small. "But sometimes I'm still afraid. Afraid I'm not strong enough. Afraid he'll crush me with his power." Julian set down his food, his gaze locking on hers. "Naomi, you're not alone anymore. You have evidence, allies, and me. Fear is natural. But don't forget the truth. He's trembling now." She wanted to believe. Yet inside, shadows lingered. She had lived too long under Ethan's dominance, decisions, and control. To fight him meant learning to trust herself again, a more brutal battle than any lawsuit. As Julian was leaving late at night, Naomi walked him to the door. A blast of cold wind rushed down the hallway, making her shiver. He pulled his coat gently around her shoulders, the natural gesture stuttering her heart. "Get some sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be better." Naomi nodded, but before he could turn, she blurted, "Julian, have you ever thought, if things had been different, if we had?" Her voice trailed, but her eyes finished the sentence. Julian looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head gently. "I've thought about it, Naomi, for years. But you're hurting now, and I won't be the reason you run from pain. When you're ready, I'll be here." Naomi froze, heart pounding. As the door closed, she knew one truth. Between fear and desire, desire was beginning to win. The next morning, Naomi sat in the temporary office Julian had arranged for her on the 12th floor of an old building by the Chicago River. The space was small, with white walls and a plain wood desk, nothing like Ethan's glittering penthouse. But here, Naomi could breathe. Here, she was herself. Julian entered carrying a new folder. "Ethan just filed a countersuit," he said, "accusing you of interfering illegally with supplier contracts. Claims you're sabotaging the company for revenge." Naomi smirked, half bitter, half weary. "Exactly as you predicted. The press will devour this." "I'll handle it," Julian reassured. "We have paperwork proving your legal ownership of the shares." "He's posturing." Naomi nodded, though unease gripped her. She imagined headlines in bold print. "Ex-wife wrecks Caldwell empire." She saw herself twisted into the trope of the vindictive woman, just another way society erased women who dared fight back. "Julian," she whispered, "what scares me isn't losing money. I'm losing my voice. I've been silenced my whole life. If they paint me as some evil ex, I'll still be invisible, just renamed." Julian leaned across the desk, his voice firm. "They'll try. But this time is different. You have the truth and a circle of women ready to testify. Ethan can't silence all of you." Naomi met his eyes, their steadiness anchoring her own. In that moment, fear loosened, and something more substantial swelled inside. A quiet, burning desire, to be seen, to be free. That evening, Naomi walked along the riverfront with Julian. The city lights rippled across the water. Jazz floated from a nearby bar, mingling with the rhythm of their footsteps. "You know," Naomi said, "I once dreamed of another life. Not as a mogul's wife or someone hidden. I wanted my own firm projects for communities, not just profits. But then I loved Ethan, and the dream disappeared. Everything disappeared." Julian stopped, facing her. "Naomi, that dream never left. It's still here. You were just forced to bury it. Now's the time to bring it back." Naomi laughed softly through sudden tears. "You always make everything sound possible." "Because it is," he said, gentle but confident. They walked in silence, the wind carrying the scent of autumn leaves. Naomi's hand trembled, then instinctively reached for his. Julian said nothing, firmly closing his fingers around hers, warmth flowing between them. At that moment, Naomi understood that fear would not vanish overnight, but desire to live, love, and be free was stronger than ever, and that desire would carry her through every storm to come. A chilly afternoon draped Chicago in silver gray. Naomi Baptiste returned to her Lincoln Park townhouse and noticed someone waiting at the door. A tall, lean teenager no more than 19 stood there in a plain black jacket. When Naomi climbed the steps, he stepped forward, eyes caught between hesitation and defiance. "Mrs. Baptiste?" His voice quivered, but held firm. "I'm Caleb Caldwell, Ethan's son." Naomi froze. For a moment, she saw Ethan's younger face, the sharp cheekbones, the cutting eyes. But unlike Ethan's cold arrogance, Caleb's gaze carried turmoil and sorrow. She opened the door, speaking quietly. "Come in. But you know anything you say could be used in court." "I know," Caleb nodded, stepping inside. "That's why I'm here." They sat in the living room, late sunlight pouring through tall windows. Naomi poured him tea. Caleb set his backpack on the table, unzipping it to reveal a small USB stick. "This has financial documents, emails, and recordings. I've been collecting them for 3 years." Naomi stared at the tiny drive, shock and caution colliding. "Why would you do this? He's still your father." Caleb clenched his hands. "He may be my father by blood, but never in life. He destroyed my mother in their divorce, took her dignity, left her with nothing. I was 14 when she died. Since then, I swore he'd never do that to anyone else again." Naomi sat silent, the ache in his words echoing her own. She recognized the pain of being stripped away, belittled, and abandoned. "I trust you," Caleb continued, "because you're the only one who's ever stood up to him and the only one who can win." Naomi took the USB, her chest tightening. "Are you sure about this? Going against your father will change everything." Caleb's eyes blazed steadily. He chose this path long ago. Now he has to pay. That evening, Julian Mercer arrived. Naomi and Caleb were waiting in the living room. Caleb stood, offering his hand. "You're her lawyer. I trust you'll know how to use what I've brought." Julian shook his hand, studying him intently. "I'll need to verify the legality, but if this is real, it could be decisive." Naomi handed him the USB. Julian slid it into his laptop. Dozens of folders lit the screen. Offshore accounts, bribery, hidden assets. A recording played Ethan's smug voice. "Don't worry. I put that money under my kid's name. No authority can touch it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "He used my name to hide funds. I've never touched them, but the paperwork shows those accounts under me." Julian's expression hardened with both concern and respect. "Do you understand what this means? You'll have to testify against your father in court." Caleb didn't flinch. "I've been waiting for this day." Naomi looked at him with both sorrow and pride. Caleb wasn't just Ethan's son. He was proof that the next generation could choose justice over power. As he spoke of his childhood, Naomi felt the echo of her own wounds. Caleb described evenings at Ethan's house, the expensive suits, endless phone calls, lavish dinners filled with wine and self-praise. "He never once asked what I liked, never congratulated me for good grades," Caleb said, voice breaking. "But I remember him bragging to a friend, 'The kid's smart, but thank God he'll never be smarter than me.'" Anger surged in Naomi. Ethan hadn't just betrayed her, he had abandoned his own child. Caleb had lived what she had lived. Invisibility, contempt, being used as a tool. Julian's voice cut through, calm but firm. Caleb, your testimony will be powerful, but the court will scrutinize your life, and the press will dig into every detail. Are you ready? Caleb met his eyes without hesitation. I lost my mother because of him. If I stay silent, I'll lose myself too. I won't let that happen. Naomi laid her hand gently on his shoulder. You don't have to endure this alone anymore, Caleb. We'll fight together. They spent the night combing through the drive Ethan's emails to accountants, mapping money through Delaware shells into Cayman accounts. Spreadsheets of consulting fees paid to city officials for zoning approvals. Most damning. Recordings of Ethan laughing as he said, "If Naomi knew I hid money under the kid's name, she'd lose her mind. But she's too busy in gowns at galas to care." Naomi's face burned, but this time with resolve, not shame. His arrogance would be his undoing. Julian shut the laptop, voice low. Naomi, with Caleb's evidence, this isn't just divorce anymore. This is federal. Prosecutors will get involved. This becomes criminal. Naomi's eyes lit with cold fire. That's exactly what I want. At midnight, Caleb rose to leave. At the door, he turned back, voice soft. Mrs. Baptiste. No, Naomi. I just wanted to say that you're the strongest woman I've ever met. Now I understand why he's afraid of you. Naomi smiled gently, pulling him into an embrace, as if he were her son. Thank you, Caleb. And remember, your father doesn't define you. You get to choose who you are. His eyes glimmered with hope, something long absent. As the door closed behind him, Naomi turned to Julian. The room hummed with unspoken weight. The battle had shifted into a war Ethan Caldwell never prepared for. Julian stepped closer, voice low. Do you see, Naomi? Even his son chose your side. Because you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone. But he's crushed. Naomi drew a deep breath, answering firmly. Then let him learn the nightmare he sowed is finally knocking at his door. Outside, Chicago still blazed with lights. But inside Naomi, the darkness was receding. Only the glow of determination remained, the strength of her growing alliance, and the vision of a future she would write herself. Not under the Caldwell name, but as Naomi Baptiste, the woman who could not be silenced. That morning, Chicago's sky was leaden, black clouds churning as if a storm was gathering. The Cross Holdings Tower loomed over the loop, its glass facade reflecting the dim light. Naomi Baptiste strode into the lobby, her black coat fitted tight and her steps steady. Julian Mercer carried a case of documents at her side, his calm gaze belying sharp vigilance. In the elevator, Naomi caught her reflection in the mirror, no longer Mrs. Caldwell, smiling silently while her husband soaked in applause. The woman staring back was sharp, eyes lit with fire, authority radiating from her stillness. The doors opened to the top floor, the boardroom. Ethan Caldwell was already seated, his face rigid. Beside him, lawyer Richard Halpern and two loyal board members. As Naomi entered, heads turned. Some looked startled. They were used to her as the silent wife, not a challenger. Naomi drew out a chair opposite Ethan. Julian stood just behind her, steady as stone. The atmosphere was thick enough to slice. Across the table sat Charles and Linda Farrow, Monica Reyes, and Daniel Huang, three pivotal investors. They exchanged subtle glances, then nodded slightly toward Naomi. The chairperson called the meeting to order. We convene today to address project delays and leadership accountability. Ethan rose, his voice a growl. I don't know why we're wasting time. These delays are caused by outside interference. I built this empire, and am the only one to save it. Naomi rose the moment he finished. With a click, the large screen lit up behind her, slides of emails, reports, and project plans bearing her digital signature. Sorry, Ethan, Naomi said, her voice clear. This empire wasn't built by you alone. Here's the Henderson report I discovered and resolved the zoning issue. Here's the Brooklyn waterfront plan, every detail I drafted. Meadowbrook restructured under my watch, saving $40 million. And this, she clicked again, revealing Allison Grant's stolen designs alongside Ethan's emails, passing them off as his own. The room rippled. Faces paled. Whispers erupted. Monica Reyes slammed the table. "I invested millions because I believed in your brilliance, Ethan. Now I see I was deceived." Daniel Huang followed, tone sharp. "Not just deception, this is liability. If the press finds out, our credibility is gone." Ethan pounded the table, roaring, "This is all fabrication. Naomi is bitter, trying to destroy me." Naomi stepped forward, eyes locked on his. "Call it revenge if you want, but revenge only exists where betrayal lives, and you betrayed me and this company." The boardroom vibrated with tension. After a quiet exchange, Charles Farrow stood, voice decisive. "We've discussed this. Today we vote. Ethan Caldwell, you are removed from executive control of Cross Holdings. Naomi Baptiste will assume the position of Chief Strategy Officer, with a new management panel overseeing all projects." A heavy silence fell. Ethan froze, eyes bulging in disbelief. Naomi sat slowly, drawing a deep breath. It was done, the first step of the coup. For the first time, Ethan lost power in the very room he once ruled. He slammed the table, glass rattling. "You can't do this. I am Cross Holdings. Without me, none of you would even be here." Naomi opened her folder, her voice low but cutting. "Wrong, Ethan. Without me, this empire would have collapsed years ago. You only took credit. Everyone sees it now." Behind her, Julian distributed prepared contracts, board restructuring agreements. These are valid under the Capital Charter. Investors may replace leadership when fraud or mismanagement endangers the company. Monica Reyes didn't hesitate, she signed first. "I invested in a sustainable vision. That vision was never yours, Ethan. It was Naomi's." Daniel Huang followed, grim. "We need capability and integrity. You've failed us. I sign." Charles Farrow hesitated, but Linda touched his shoulder. "You know how much we've lost to him already." Charles nodded, pressing his signature firmly. Each stroke of ink cut deeper than any blade. Ethan stared at the paper, face drained. He turned on Naomi, eyes bloodshot. You did this to me." Naomi's reply was soft as wind, sharp as glass. "I only reclaimed what was mine. And this time, you can't hide the truth." The meeting adjourned in tense silence. Ethan stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass trembled. Staff in the hallway gawked, bewildered. Naomi walked out slowly, Julian beside her. She gripped the rail in the elevator, emotions surging: victory, relief, and a sorrow she couldn't name. "You okay?" Julian asked quietly. Naomi nodded. "Yes. For the first time in 8 years, I feel the light on me." His smile was gentle, proud. "You just toppled an empire with your mind, Naomi. No light could shine brighter." When the doors opened, Naomi stepped into the Grand Cross Holdings lobby. Curious eyes followed. Whispers spread. This time, Naomi did not bow her head. She strode forward, as if the glass atrium finally belonged to her. In the sunset, the fresh contracts bathed in their Lincoln Park office. Julian uncorked a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. "This is only the beginning," he said. "We stripped him of corporate power, but he won't sit still. He'll unleash the press, politics, everything he has." Naomi lifted her glass, eyes sharp as steel. "Let him. The more he thrashes, the more he exposes himself. Ethan has lived in a world where women stayed silent. He's never faced women who stand together." Their glasses clinked, a clear chime. Naomi sipped, the bitter edge fading into sweetness like her battle. Harsh, but promising triumph. Her mind turned to Caleb, the brave son ready to stand against his father, to Monica, Sophia, Allison, and Maria, the women who placed trust in her, to Julian, the man who didn't just see her intellect, but guarded it as treasure. Naomi smiled faintly. The subsequent battles would be more challenging. But she was ready, because now she no longer fought alone. On the first day of trial, Chicago lay shrouded in fog, wind slicing cold through the federal courthouse steps. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras snapping in frenzied bursts. Ethan Caldwell's name no longer adorned the glossy covers of business magazines as the Golden Man, but filled investigative columns and legal dockets. Naomi Baptiste stepped out of a black SUV in a charcoal grey suit, lines cut sharp, her dark eyes steady with rare calm. Julian Mercer walked at her side, face grave, arms weighted with thick files. Behind them, Caleb Caldwell emerged thin, pale, but with a gaze carved in resolve. The sight of Ethan's son, once hidden, now walking in defiance of his father, sent a shockwave through the press corps. A reporter shouted, "Naomi, are you just trying to ruin your ex-husband to take his fortune?" Naomi halted, lifted her chin. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm bringing the truth into the light." The crowd hushed, if only for a breath, before the chaos swelled again. Naomi didn't care. Each step inside the courthouse rang like a declaration. She was no longer anyone's shadow. Courtroom 7 vibrated with tension. Judge Margaret Thornfield, silver-haired and famously strict, presided from the bench. On the plaintiff's side, Julian and Naomi. On the defense, Ethan Caldwell, flanked by his phalanx of attorneys. Richard Halpern rose first, voice slick. "Your Honor, this is a divorce inflated into a smear campaign. Mr. Caldwell built Cross Holdings with unmatched talent and tireless labor. His ex-wife, embittered, now seeks to seize assets through baseless accusations." Whispers rippled through the gallery. Naomi sat still, back straight, expression unreadable. Julian took the floor, his voice ringing clear. "Your Honor, we will prove Naomi Baptiste was not merely a contributor, she was the true architect of Cross Holdings. We will show that Ethan Caldwell concealed assets, bribed officials, and even used his son to cover illegal accounts. This is not the story of a bitter ex-wife. This is the story of a woman erased from history, now standing to reclaim the truth." The room turned toward Naomi. A flutter of nerves touched her chest, but she thought of the faces of the women around her townhouse table, their faith stitching strength into her spine. The first witness, Caleb Caldwell. He mounted the stand, young face solemn, eyes hard. "Julian, Caleb, tell the court about your father's use of offshore accounts." Caleb drew breath. "He opened accounts in my name when I was underage. I didn't know until I stumbled on the paperwork. I kept copies because I knew someday the truth would matter." Ethan shot up, shouting, "Lies. The boy's been poisoned by his mother for years." The gavel cracked. Judge Thornfield's voice cut sharply. "Mr. Caldwell, sit down. Interrupt again, and you'll be held in contempt." Caleb's voice steadied. "He didn't see me as a son. He saw me as a shield to hide money. I'm not here to destroy him, but to tell the truth." Naomi's eyes misted. Pride swelled in her chest. The boy abandoned by his father had chosen justice, even at the cost of blood ties. The courtroom stilled, the scribble of journalists' pens the only sound. Halpern pressed Caleb. "Why would a teenager preserve financial records?" Caleb replied firmly, "Because I knew someone would need them one day. That day is today." Julian nodded with satisfaction. Next came Monica Reyes, hair tied back, eyes like blades. "I invested in Cross Holdings in 2017. It wasn't Ethan who convinced me, it was Naomi Baptiste. She presented the risk analysis and the solutions. I invested because I believed in her vision. Yet afterward, the world credited Ethan." Emails flashed on screen, Naomi's digital signature clear. Monica's voice rang. "I was deceived when Naomi's work was buried, and Ethan basked in the spotlight." Reporters scribbled furiously. "Investor confirms Ethan stole wife's credit." Then Alison Grant, architect. She carried 2 drawings, one hers, one doctored and paraded as Ethan's. "Mr. Caldwell took my design, altered a few details, and claimed it as his own. It nearly destroyed my career and compromised safety standards." The judge fixed her gaze on Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, your response?" Ethan sneered. "Failures always cling to smear the successful." Gasps filled the room. Julian struck. "Your Honor, that contemptuous dismissal is exactly what we aim to prove, that Mr. Caldwell thrives on theft, denial, and exploitation." At recess, Naomi walked the hall, swarmed by the press. "Naomi, "Do you think you've shattered the golden man image?" one called out. Naomi stopped, lifted her chin. "I haven't shattered anything. I just removed the mask. Behind it wasn't gold, just rusted steel." The phrase tore across social media. Within hours, steel mask trended worldwide, a symbol of unmasking powerful men who built empires on others' labor. That afternoon, Julian played the final card, an audio recording from Sofia Delgado, widow of Ethan's late partner. Ethan's voice crackled through the speakers, dripping arrogance. "Naomi's my best card. She works. I take the credit. I'll toss and replace her with a younger model if she ever realizes it." Simple as that. The courtroom froze, Ethan's face drained white, and words caught in his throat. Judge Thornfield's gavel rang out, voice hard as iron. "We've heard enough." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Years of erasure, of being made invisible, dissolved into nothing. The truth was no longer buried. And as silence fell heavy in courtroom 7, Naomi knew the verdict would snap the final chain. On Judgment Day, the federal courthouse overflowed. Reporters, investors, former Cross Holdings employees, everyone pressed inside, waiting for one of Chicago's most powerful men to be weighed and sentenced. Naomi Baptiste sat at the plaintiff's table. Her heart pounded, but her face remained composed. Beside her, Julian flipped through final notes, while Caleb clenched his fists tight, forcing calm. Across the aisle, Ethan Caldwell wore a tailored suit, but no polish could hide the bloodshot eyes, the strained face, the thin layer of sweat under the lights. Judge Margaret Thornfield struck her gavel. Her voice rang through the hushed courtroom. After days of testimony, based on evidence and sworn statements, the court reaches its decision. The room froze. All eyes were fixed on the bench. First, the judge declared, the prenuptial agreement between Mr. Ethan Caldwell and Mrs. Naomi Baptiste is hereby voided, as the defendant concealed material financial information and assets. A wave of murmurs broke out. Ethan lurched forward to protest, but Halpin clamped his arm, shaking his head in defeat. Second, the judge continued, given the evidence of Mrs. Baptiste's direct and decisive contributions to the growth of Cross Holdings, the court awards her 75% of all marital assets, including company shares, real estate, and investments. Naomi drew in a breath. Those cold numbers were more than money recognition for 8 years of unseen labor. Third, the judge's voice sharpened. In light of documented illegal transfers, bribery, and tax evasion, Mr. Caldwell's case is referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Shutters snapped without pause. Ethan went pale, collapsing back into his chair. The gavel struck. Court adjourned. Naomi rose, legs trembling faintly, but her heart steady. Caleb rushed to hug her, whispering, "We did it." Julian laid a hand on her shoulder, smiling for the first time in days. Across the aisle, reporters swarmed Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, any comment on the indictment? Do you deny your son's testimony? Did you exploit your wife to build your empire?" Ethan shoved past, face ashen, shouting, "It's all lies. I'll be back. You'll regret this." But his words rang like the cries of a drowning man. Naomi stepped into the afternoon light, cameras flaring. A voice rose above the crowd. "Naomi, what do you say to women watching this trial?" Naomi paused, drew a deep breath. "Remember this, silence never protects us. Justice doesn't come unless we stand up. I'm not a hero, I'm just a woman tired of being dismissed. And I know I'm not the only one." Her words rippled through the crowd, then across the nation. By evening, they flooded social media. That afternoon, headlines blanketed every screen. Ethan Caldwell, once the golden man of Chicago real estate, loses most of his fortune to ex-wife Naomi Baptiste in today's ruling. Federal prosecutors to pursue fraud, bribery, and tax evasion charges. "In un café, patron murmure." "So it was her all along," a young woman whispered. "Hard to believe a man like Caldwell could fall so fast," an older man muttered. Naomi sat half-hidden in a knit cap at a corner table, listening quietly. For the first time, her name was no longer Mrs. Caldwell. It was a name tied to truth. Julian walked in carrying evening papers. He set them down with a smile. "Have you seen this?" Naomi shook her head. He opened the front page. A photo of her leaving court filled half the spread, under the headline, "The Woman in the Shadows. Naomi Baptiste exposes the Caldwell Empire." Naomi stared, pride mixed with heaviness. "I don't want to be just a symbol. I want this to change something real." Julian nodded. "It already has. Women are watching. You opened a door they thought was locked." Meanwhile, in the once luxurious penthouse, Ethan Caldwell slumped at a liquor-stained table. On the TV, his downfall replayed endlessly. Sandwiched between reports of indictment, he hurled a glass against the wall, screaming, "You'll pay for this. Naomi, you'll never escape me." But no one listened. Former allies cut ties one by one. Calls no longer brought deals, only lawyers and investigators. The empire he once lorded over lay in ruins. In a haze of drink, he remembered Naomi's eyes in court, steady, unflinching, fearless. And he knew he had lost long before the gavel fell. He had lost the day he underestimated her. Late that night, Naomi returned to her Lincoln Park townhouse. Caleb read on the sofa. Julian typed emails to their network. The house glowed warmly, the opposite of Ethan's cold penthouse. Naomi sat beside Caleb. "You did so well today." He smiled faintly, hope softening his face. "It feels like I finally carried out what Mom wanted. Like I did something right." Naomi pulled him into an embrace. "You did right. And now, you'll never live in his shadow again." Julian looked up, pride in his eyes. "Naomi, we didn't just win a case. We changed the game." Naomi glanced around the room, a woman once erased, a steadfast lawyer, a son who chose truth. Together, they looked almost like a family. She smiled softly. From the ashes of betrayal, something new was rising. 3 weeks after the verdict, the face of Cross Holdings had transformed. Caldwell had been stripped away on the nameplate outside the glass tower and replaced by Baptiste Strategic Group, a slight change in lettering but a seismic shift in meaning. The company was no longer an empire built on theft and exploitation. It was reborn as a foundation of transparency and community. Naomi Baptiste walked through the lobby. Employees, many who once bowed silently to Ethan, now stood to greet her with genuine respect. She was no longer the quiet wife. She was the strategist who had saved the company from collapse. Monica Reyes, Maria Santos, and Daniel Huang waited in the boardroom. Caleb sat at the end of the table, laptop open, typing notes. Julian stood beside Naomi, his expression more at ease than it had been in months. Naomi began, "We cannot continue as before. Cross Holdings was built on deception. If we want to endure, we must become a model for something new, putting community before profit." She clicked the screen, unveiling plans for restructuring, sustainable development projects, affordable housing, and a fund to support women entrepreneurs. Monica nodded. "This is why I chose to stand with you. This market has needed a new path for a long time." Maria added, "Atlas Steel will back you fully. I want my company tied not just to supply chains, but to a fairer future." Naomi smiled softly, eyes meeting Caleb's. The young man gave a subtle nod, a silent vow that his generation would carry forward this new legacy. That evening, Naomi returned to her townhouse. Julian stayed behind to help her organize files. The room glowed in warm lamplight, paper rustling between them. Naomi set her pen down. "I'm still not used to people looking at me as a leader." Julian glanced up, gaze gentle. "Naomi, you've been leading for years. They just refuse to see it." She chuckled, a warmth rising in her chest. "You always know how to make me believe." "I don't make you believe," Julian said firmly. "I only remind you of what you forgot. You were never invisible." She fell silent, then whispered, "Julian, I lived 8 years in shadows, but now, maybe I'm ready for the light." He stepped closer, took her hand. No hesitation now, no distance carved by fear. Just two people who had weathered storms together, finally finding each other in calm. On a crisp November morning, Naomi stood atop the headquarters of Baptiste Strategic Group, gazing across Chicago's skyline. Streets and towers glinted under a pale winter Sunday. She thought of her journey from the woman dismissed and silenced to the one now reshaping an entire industry. The press still called Caldwell's downfall a historic collapse, but Naomi knew the real story wasn't his ruin. It was the rise of those he once trampled. Alison Grant reopened her design firm, and her name was finally on her work. Monica Reyes became a pioneer in transparent investment funds. Maria Santos expanded Atlas Steel with programs protecting immigrant workers. And Caleb, once used as a pawn, now sat at Naomi's side, learning to build rather than to conceal. That night, Naomi gathered her allies again in the familiar townhouse. The long dining table, lit by soft candles, now brimmed with faces once silenced but no longer. They raised their glasses, not just for a legal victory, but for something larger, the transformation of pain into collective power. "Naomi," Monica said, trembling, "you showed us women don't need silence to stay safe." Naomi's eyes glowed with pride. "None of us won alone. This isn't just my story, it's all of ours." Julian sat quietly at the head of the table, watching her with quiet awe. When the others departed, he came to her side. "You did what I believed from the start, turned shadows into light." Naomi smiled, stepping closer, "And you reminded me who I was, even when I forgot." They stood together, the city glowing outside, before she whispered, "Julian, I don't just want to build an empire for business. I want to build one for life with you." His eyes softened, warmth like fire beneath them. "Then let me walk beside you, not as your lawyer, but as your partner." That night, Naomi lay in Julian's arms, hearing his heartbeat steady against hers. She remembered her grandmother's words in the dark. "A wise woman always keeps a door for herself." Naomi smiled. She had kept that door, and when she walked through, she found justice and herself. The papers would call her the woman who built a new empire tomorrow. But to Naomi, the most incredible truth was more straightforward. At last, she was no longer invisible.